Nearly 60 former national security officials, Republicans and Democrats, and one of our guests today are calling out Trump's national emergency declaration on the southern border, saying there is, quote, no factual basis for it. And 26 former GOP lawmakers issued their own letter today, asking for currently serving colleagues to protect the Constitution and vote for the resolution to block Trump's declaration, which will be voted on in the House tomorrow. Jeremy?
Well, there is a premise underlying the president's emergency declaration that there's a national security crisis at the southern border. And so more than 60 former national security officials from both parties across administrations, people who are experts in counterterrorism, took a look at this, took a look at the evidence, to look at the migration flows, took a look at the efforts to actually solve the border issues that we know exist. And the conclusion from these experts was that no, there is no national security emergency, and that in fact this is a fake emergency. And so in a filing in the various litigations across the country today, those experts have made their voice heard.
You told us this was going to happen last week, and we were glad to have that news. I heard from, after you reported that here, I asked a former senior intelligence official about it, and he said it was my job at one time to know where all the terrorists were, and there were never any on the southern border. I mean, it's sort of, you know, the anatomy of a lie. I mean, is there more that former officials can do to combat the fake news coming out of the president?
I think it's important to note that terrorists aren't streaming across the border, but even if they were coming in small groups, a wall, a concrete or steel slat wall would not stop them. There is a way to do smart border security, and I think Congress well understands that, and they have repeatedly said, no, Mr. President, your wall is not the answer to whatever problems may exist.
Where do you think this wall, I mean, it's a fake wall, and now we know from Donald Trump in the Rose Garden it's a fake emergency.
Yeah, fake wall, fake emergency. The benefit of this note is that it is the best amicus curiae brief we could get, because we know this is eventually going to go to the Supreme Court. That's what's going to happen here. And we needed experts, bipartisan experts, to come forward and say, look, this is all the evidence that you're going to need to stop this. The 16 states that are against it, everybody else is against it. So that's what's important. The concern that I have at the end of the day, though, is I don't know if I trust our court system, because at the end of the day, he's the president of the United States, and depending on how much of an originalist the Supreme Court wants to be, which is where I think this is going to end up, they may say, you know what, the final call is always by the president. So I hope they take these experts from various administrations and say that they overrule him, that they look at the three branches of government and say, hey, look, he's trying to overrule Congress, because if they just say that the commander-in-chief makes this decision, he's going to get his emergency.
Yeah, this story reminds me of the national security story, where people that have sort of gone along, kept their mouth shut, all of a sudden they're worried, you know. And I'm not calling out any single individual, but it again feels like, what did you think was going to happen?
Exactly. And we've seen this movie before. We know how it's going to end. I think one of the most disturbing things that Donald Trump said through this process is he admitted that this is going to go through the courts and it's going to get dragged out. But then he predicted he would win in the Supreme Court. Right. That's a big problem. If you're predicting a victory in the Supreme Court, what do you know that we don't know in terms of the ability for the Supreme Court to do their job, to look at the record, to look at these pieces of evidence of whether or not he's actually made a case for a national emergency, which is part of the law, which is what he needs to do. He has not followed the law. Supreme Court should be making a decision based on the law, not some promise to Trump.
All right. My thanks to Jeremy, Stephanie, Jason, and Donna and the Washington Bureau for hosting us. That does it.
Thanks for watching. To see more videos, click right here, and subscribe.